Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon at Limelight Arts Travels Talking Tours. And I'm joined today by with Robert Gay. We're going to talk about a tour that he's leading next year called Paris and Berlin Musical Cities. But before we get started, and I'd say hello to Robert, we would just like to read an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Limelight Arts Travel acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Well, good afternoon, Robert.
Hi, Mark.
Thanks for joining us today.
Terrific. Good to be
Good to see you back in Australia.
Yes. So I'm really here. But
well, you spend half your life up overseas,
I do, yes.
or in Europe or London, and off touring, of course, and that's partly why we're here today, to talk about your upcoming travels and your tour with us to Paris and Berlin next year.
Yeah. So I just starting. Hi everyone. Greetings to you all. This two-city destination is a really nice way to do a tour. Two big cities. I chose Paris and Berlin, nicely different, but with wonderful musical possibilities in both cities. Incredible. There's really nothing much else that has the range that these two cities have. And then we looked around for a good time to go. We wanted a tour that was going to run somewhere, didn't really matter where, somewhere between the two big festival tours that I'm doing next year. The Baden-Baden Festival Tour, which is early in the year, has a sensational program. Incredible, but it starts in late March going into April. And then the Staatsoper Festival Tour, which is in August. That's actually really rather late. The Staatsoper Festival sort of ends really at the end, right at the end of August. So we've got these. There were the two sort of parameters, and we thought we want one tour to go in between. So we looked around, and with the Paris and Berlin being the two cities that we wanted to do, we came up with actually the thing that put the tour in place was when I discovered that we could see a new production in Berlin. It was a matter of either finding a starting point or an ending point, and then sort of seeing which way to go, whether we go Berlin, Paris, Paris, Berlin, whatever. So there was this possibility to see Christian Thieleman's first new production with the Staatsoper Unter den Linden in Berlin. He, as you know, as you probably know, how he took over rather suddenly, rather unexpectedly, when Barenboim just was unable to continue. The great Daniel Barenboim, who just seemed to be going to be there forever, like around forever, suddenly was not well, and seriously not well. And so there was who's available to take over. Christian Thielemann took over. And he announced that the first opera that he wanted to do as a new production was already performed. We were in Berlin on a tour this year, and it was just after we were there. And it's called The Silent Woman, Die Schweigsame Frau. It's by Richard Strauss. And these days, I have to say, I just meet the most enormous number of people who are really, really keen about Richard Strauss. This would not, 20 years ago, I didn't really notice this. People were aware of Strauss. People knew the tone poems. They knew Salome, sort of thing. But now, if you look at the programs around the world, the Strauss operas are really, really featured. And so, a new production of something like Die Frau ohne Schatten, the woman without a shadow, or Arabella, any of the later operas, the ones that come after the First World War, because with Strauss you've got Salome, Electra, and Der Rosenkavalier before the First World War. Right? They're the really popular three. Straight after the war, you have Ariadne of Naxos. And then 1919, I think it is, you have Die Frau ohne Schatten, The Woman Without a Shadow, an extraordinarily difficult work, but which is now pretty much in the repertoires of the big opera companies. Then there's the ones in the 20s, the Intermezzo, which gets the occasional outing. That's a comic opera that gets an occasional outing. And then the very strange one called the Egyptian Helen, die ägyptische Helena, is a very strange work. That's very rarely done. And then into the new decade, into the troublesome decade for a German composer, to the 1830s, you have this opera with a libretto by Stefan Zweig. Now, up till this point, Hugo von Hofmannsthal had been Strauss's librettist for everything, just everything. And he suddenly died. Just absolutely, I mean, he and Strauss were exchanging letters, and suddenly Strauss doesn't get a reply to something. And Hofmannsthal is not just unwell, he just collapsed and died.
Okay.
Strauss is like reeling. This is because he works so together with Hofmannsthal. He depended on Hofmannsthal for the perfect librettos. And then a suggestion came up that he might work with Stefan Zweig. So Stefan Zweig was very, very famous at this point in the 20s, very famous. We move into the 30s though, and we have big trouble because a very bad regime is setting itself up, and Stefan Zweig is a Jewish man, right? So a huge problem. There were all sorts of things. Zweig said, I will do it without acknowledgement, without my name on it. Strauss said, I refuse to accept that idea. There was a possibility that another person would be brought in and the work would be hidden behind the other person's name. And Strauss said, no, absolutely refuse. It has your name or it doesn't happen. Everything looked all right. It got the go-ahead. From the government. Strauss was very, very, very famous, you have to remember. Hugely famous, probably the most famous living German at that point, up to that point. And he was just known everywhere. And it was something for the new Reich to have a Strauss premiere in Berlin, it was going to be in Dresden. All the operas premiered in Dresden with Strauss. Almost all of them. And so it got the go-ahead. Strauss composed the work. He and Zweig worked incredibly well together. And it was only at the very last minute leading up to the opening night that Strauss, at the theatre for a rehearsal, asked to see the program for the opera. And they didn't want to show him because they had left Stefan Zweig's name off the program. And Strauss noticed this and said, the opening night doesn't go ahead unless the program is corrected. Right? So what happened was that the program was corrected, and it had an opening night and it had 3 following performances, and then it was shut down and banned throughout Germany. Right? So it had 4.
Totally banned.
Totally banned. Yeah, total ban. This was, of course, a huge shock. I mean, Strauss was in charge of music in Germany. It was like, and what to do. So anyhow, the story after that gets very, very complicated. But basically, it was banned. Now, this opera, which is a very complex, musically complex comic opera. Very simple story, basically. It's the story, pretty well, of Don Pasquale. If you know of Don Pasquale, the old man who decides to marry a young wife, because she's so sweet and lovely, and and then she turns into a sort of virago or harridan, and this is all because he'd refused to let his nephew marry the girl he wanted to marry. So, and this is exactly the story of Die Schweigsame Frau. It's exactly the same story as Don Pasquale. So the story itself is very straightforward. Very kind of easy to follow, really, no tricks in it at all. And there are a couple of nice references to operas like Barbara of Seville, because there's a singing lesson in the second act, and it's a big, it's a 3-act opera, big opera. It's a lot of music. It's long, as the act lengths are about 50 minutes for Act 1, 70 minutes for Act 2, and 50 minutes for Act 3. So it's a big work. So when I saw that a new production of this work, which I had never seen, I thought, this is what we go for, and this will mark either the beginning or the end of the tour, depending on what we can find to work with Paris. And so we decided that, I don't know, there was just something I really wanted to make it Paris, Berlin. I thought, I mean, it wouldn't matter. Berlin, Paris also works. But anyhow, we decided to make the Die Schweigsame Frau on the last night of the tour. And so that's why the tour is as it is. You see it on the program that's been published. You see all the details there of all the things that we're doing. But that is the reason why the tour was placed as it was. I'll talk just in general now about the operas, because I'm an opera person. I'm afraid, I'm an opera.
Can I just ask, going back to
Yes.
the Die Schweigsame Frau, how was it received at the time before it was shut down?
It was look, it's hard. Those sorts of things are hard to say. Yeah. You can imagine an audience that's packed with Nazi members of the Nazi Party, who've been forced to do what they didn't want to do, which was announce the name of the librettist. It's hugely problematic. But it was by the general public well received. I mean, it's a comic opera, and of course the thing is, what you can't think about historically when I'm teaching, I just always say, you've got to forget about the future. You don't know what's going to happen. You have to be in the moment, in the present, as we go on these slow courses that I run at the Centre for Continuing Education, have done now for, coming up soon to 40 years. And you have to not know what's going to happen. You have to not know that the First World War is going to happen, or that the Second World War is going to happen, and all the horror of those things. When you're in 1910, as I am in the course that I'm teaching at the moment, we never refer to the First World War. People didn't know about the First World War. It hadn't happened. So with the Second World War, again, the war hadn't happened, but things were not looking good. And the Nazis had come out very obviously against Jewish people. So that was a very obvious situation. And anyhow, it was well enough received, but it was shut down. For performances, and then not only shut down, but banned for performance throughout Germany. Okay. So looking at the other operas that we're doing, we've got it's a kind of nice range. This is when I put the operas in place. Cavalli. Cavalli he's the pupil of Monteverdi. So after the death of Monteverdi in the 1640s, having written the Coronation of Poppea, great opera by Monteverdi, his final opera, his pupil Cavalli takes over, and He writes a lot of operas. There are a vast number, whereas Monteverdi really only wrote a handful of operas. He's really right at the beginning of when anybody was writing operas. He wrote the first famous opera ever written, 1607, Orfeo. Right, that's the Legend of Orfeo, La Favola d'Orfeo, is 1607, Monteverdi. But this is then sort of in the 1640s, and Cavalli takes over, and he writes almost every year a new opera. There's a vast number of them. And the one that we're going to see is one of the most delightful. It's La Callisto of Cavalli. So that's a nice early Baroque opera. Then we jump to a bel canto opera. So we have Norma, one of the famous bel canto operas, one of the ones that John Sutherland made, super famous, and Callas, Maria Callas, the two of them together made hugely famous Bellini's Norma. We see Norma, so we have a bel canto opera. Then Rusalka, and that's a absolutely central romantic work, right? Written 1901, first performed 1901, and it's Dvorak, he's a lovely writer. It's a beautiful score, really wonderful score. I'll talk about casts and things a bit later on when I'm talking about the performers. And then a modern opera, so Die Schweigsame Frau, The Silent Woman, from 1935, which is already, I've made a little note to myself here to say that 1935 is already 90 years ago.
Wow.
Opera, in 10 years' time, it will be having its centenary
anniversary.
I mean, this is kind of astonishing. There we go, the time passes. So we've got 4 operas. Then we have 2 big orchestral concerts. The first one with the Philharmonie de Paris, and the second one with the Berlin Philharmonic. Right? What you want is a program that's got the Berlin Philharmonic. If you're going to Berlin, you want to have the Berlin Philharmonic. And we have 2 terrific conductors there. With the Philharmonie de Paris, at the moment, Klaus Mekela, he's from Finland.
Yeah.
Klaus Mekela, he's 29.
Wow.
29. When I first saw him, he was 27. I've seen him now probably 4 or 5 times conducting. And the really astonishing thing about this young man is that he is already conductor designate for the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, chosen by the orchestral players, not just appointed by somebody, but, we'll give this guy a try. No, this is the players have selected him. So Klaus Mekela is, he's a force to be reckoned with. A young man who, and he's got a vast range and continues to expand. As you can imagine, a man of 29, he's still conducting things that are performances for the first time that he's conducting. Yeah. So he's conducting the Philharmonie de Paris. That's his orchestra at the moment. I think maybe he gives that one up when he gets the other 2. The other 2 are still something like 18 months away. But he's conductor designate of Concertgebouw and Chicago Symphony. The Berlin Philharmonic, of course, has been around for ages. It was really known by that name since 1882. And the conductor is one of my favorite conductors in Munich. I saw him a lot in Munich, and I thought, this man is amazing, fantastic. His name is Kirill Petrenko. Perhaps the most well-known name, but this man is absolutely brilliant. Great conductor. Kirill Petrenko. He got the job, the Berlin Philharmonic job, and we see him there. Talk about the program later on. And as well, we have one chamber music concert with a wonderful string quartet, a French string quartet, and one ballet. So 4 operas from 4 different periods, 2 big orchestral concerts, a fabulous chamber music concert, Beethoven, all Beethoven, and then a ballet. Again, I'll talk about those works a little bit later. The venues, that was the other thing, with the 2 cities, with the 2 big cities, it's really nice to have a good run of venues. So in Paris, we start, the Callisto is at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées. Right? It's a comparatively modern theatre. When I say that, it opened over a century ago, but you know, it kind of it looks, it even still sort of vaguely looks modern. It's sort of a very, very early Art Deco building. And the incredible thing about that venue, which is where we will see the opera La Callisto, is that it was, in the year that it opened, 1913, it became the venue for Le Sacre du Printemps, the Rite of Spring, Stravinsky's new ballet score. Right? They did it in the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, where we will be sitting watching. That's a pretty amazing thing. And I remember in 2013, on the 100th anniversary, I took a group, we went to Paris and we sat in the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées and heard, we didn't see it danced, but we heard it, the Sacre, the Rite of Spring played. So that's a pretty exciting way to start. Then the Opera Bastille, 1989, it didn't actually open in 89, it opened the following year, but it was for the French Revolution. It was to mark the French Revolution. It was because the Palais Garnier, where we're also going, I'll talk about that in a moment, was really past its use-by date, and certainly for big operas, it just couldn't manage any longer. So they built a huge new opera house. The building itself is enormous. It's positioned down there on the Place de la Bastille, really a marvelous big building, and it has the biggest opera stage in Europe. It's a huge opera stage. So we're there for, we'll talk about the works later on. I'll just mention that's the Rusalka.
Yes.
Rusalka is going to be at the Philharmonie de Paris. This is a big concert. This is a strange story. Paris didn't really have an absolutely sensational concert hall. The Salle Pleyel, I went there a few times to the Salle Pleyel, and you go, excuse me, this is not really, it's, yes, it's a big auditorium. It's, you know, like, wow, it's got a lot of seats in it, but it is incredibly ordinary and very, very past its use-by date. Anyhow, they started to build a new, just before the financial crisis. They committed to a huge, huge new building out at this on the edge of Paris, right on the périphérique, you know, the street that goes right around Paris. Out there's a huge park, and there was already there a building called the Cité de la Musique. So they were clearly thinking about this in advance. That had been there for some time. Not particularly amazing building, but a nice modern building. And then next to it, they decided to build this absolutely enormous building. The weird thing is, I only discovered this quite recently, was that the brief for the architect, for Jean Nouvel, was to build something that looked like a hill, absolutely a huge hill, because at that part of Paris it's very flat. It's very, very far out. To get to it, it's a schlep out to get there. And the Parisians are not entirely thrilled with this, but they've got a fabulous new concert hall in this enormous building, which actually has got a restaurant on top up here. And you look out over Paris. So you look out as though you're on Montmartre or something like that, or the what's the great church on the hill? The Sacre-Cœur, yes, on that hill there, looking out. You know, they've built something that's almost as as high as that. Huge, huge building, very strange modern building, but inside a glorious, glorious concert hall. One of the most beautiful concert halls in the world with a sensational acoustic. Absolutely wonderful. And Jean Nouvel's got better and better at doing acoustics. He did Lucerne, then he did Copenhagen. The next one was Paris, I think. And then I've just lost the thread of the latest one he's done. Yeah, anyhow, he's done a lot of wonderful concert halls. And whenever I'm in Copenhagen Concert Hall or in the Paris Concert Hall, or or in Lucerne, you think which is the best one, because all that same architect. Although the one in Lucerne is completely different from the ones that, because the ones that are more recent are done in that sort of, it's called a sort of an oyster shape, sort of almost in the round, but not quite in the way that the Berlin Philharmonic is, which is one of the early ones in the round. But these beautiful sort of very shallow concert halls that spread wide on the side, wonderful acoustics. Then we go to the Palais Garnier. This is the old Paris Opera, being sensationally restored, looking really fabulous. Opened in 1875, so a really, really great opera house that's still there. Sits on the Avenue de l'Opéra. This is Haussmann's Paris. Haussmann drove that avenue through a whole old district of Paris, smashed through the Avenue de l'Opéra, and Garnier had already built the opera house at the other end. So you get this fantastic, fantastic setting for the Palais Garnier, the old Paris Opera. That's used now mostly for ballet, and our ballet program will be there. But they do, and they do the early operas. If the Callisto could have been done there, but they chose to. Actually, the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées will be much better for the La Callisto. Okay, then to just two venues in Berlin, the Staatsoper Unter den Linden. Now, this is the Staatsoper that sits on the street called Unter den Linden, right? So the Unter den Linden, which has for years been a complete mess because they put a metro underneath the Unter den Linden, took forever. Berlin's forever building new things and not finishing them. Like they built the new airport and didn't finish it. And it was like, what are you doing? And they're going bankrupt, of course, at the same moment, and running out of money. But still, they finally finished the metro. So the Unter den Linden is the avenue which runs, of course, between the Brandenburg Gate and down at actually the museum.
Museum Island.
Yeah, the Museum Island. That is the Unter den Linden, and the Opera House is down there. It has had a beautiful renovation. The whole interior has been renovated. Looks absolutely wonderful. But the real thing that they did with the renovation was that they put in entirely new stage equipment. So at the Staatsoper, you can have. I saw we were there for China, the Mussorgsky unfinished opera that was finished by others. China, there's a famous point where the stage was absolutely full of chorus members, the whole chorus, right? Huge number of people, maybe 300 people on stage, singing a huge piece. And it's a scene where the people of Paris, the old believers, they commit suicide. They set fire to the forest, and they had to, of course, something had to happen. And they were on this stage, 300 people singing, and the stage just sank into the floor, right? And sank and sank and sank and sank and sank and sank. And there's no way you could see anything. It went right down. And so the new stage machinery is something to be observed at Staatsoper Unter den Linden. And then the famous Berlin Philharmonie. The nice thing there is that there are actually two buildings. I remember on the last tour I was there, we just happened to come at it at a particular angle. We were coming from the art gallery, as we will be doing on this tour. And I said to people, at last now you see the two Berlin Philharmonie buildings. There's a big one, the big concert hall that everybody knows, but there's a small concert hall. The dates were actually, they're fairly different in date, but the same design, but one small, one large. The big hall, 1960, opened in 1963. That's when the wall was still, it was very close. Very, very shockingly, it was with only a few hundred yards from the Berlin Wall. It was in a part of Berlin that nobody ever went to.
Right.
And they said, we can fix this. We'll build the new concert hall there, and then everybody will have to go if they want to hear the Berlin Philharmonic. So literally amazing. The huge hall, you know the look of that one. Well, a small version of it sits beside it. In fact, I've known taxi drivers to pull up at the wrong theatre. And, we go in and it's the small hall because it looks the same entrance sort of thing. Well, not the same entrance, but very similar. And that's the chamber music hall where we'll hear our chamber music, our string quartet concert. Okay, with the performers, the Orchestra de Paris and Klaus Mekela, I've really sort of talked about sufficiently. But what they're playing, the big work that they're playing, is the Mahler Symphony No. 1, Mahler 1. There are other things in the program. We'll come to that. I've got that further down somewhere. Where have I put it? Maybe it's the. Oh yes, I know what we're hearing. I have to jump backwards and forwards between the actual buildings and the instrumentals. Gauthier Capuçon is playing the Rococo variations of Tchaikovsky. He's the brother of Renaud. You would know Renaud and Gauthier Capuçon. They're both Renaud, perhaps more famous even than Gauthier, but still. That's for the concert in the Berlin Philharmonic. And Kirill Petrenko is, now wait a minute, I was with the Orchestra de Paris, wasn't I? I've jumped cities here, excuse me, you probably noticed I've jumped for cities, but never mind. With the Berlin Philharmonic, we hear the Stravinsky's Pulcinella and the Beethoven Symphony No. 2, as well as that Rococo variations. That's how the program goes. Oh, and in the Paris program, we've got to look at a different section. Where did I put it? Oh yes, the pianist. We have before the Mahler First Symphony, we have the Grieg Piano Concerto. The astonishing thing here is I looked up the pianist, and the pianist is a blind man, blind from birth. I was like, I could not believe, thought this seems impossible. Apparently, from a boy, 4 years old, he started having piano lessons. He's completely at ease with this extraordinary thing. He's worked out how to teach himself the music. He can't read the music, of course. Really quite extraordinary. A Japanese man by the name of Nobuyuki Tsuji. Tsuji, is it? Tsuji. So he's playing the Grieg, and then we have the yes. Anyhow, I think I've covered everything. I just was a little bit muddled there, but that's okay. And I've talked about the Staatskapelle Dresden and Christian Thielemann. We've talked about Thielemann as well. That's
the quartet.
We'll continue down now with the French quartet. They're apparently based in Boulogne. Seems a strange place, but I suppose halfway between London and Paris or something like that. But there it is. There's an excellent music school there apparently. And a wonderful program, all Beethoven, 2 early Opus 18 string quartets, Opus 18 numbers 4 and 5, Um, that's the two keys are there's an A major and C minor are the two keys, and then the Opus 135, the first of the late great string quartets of Beethoven, when he was completely stone deaf, unbelievable, but still, and that the key for that one, the E flat major, Opus 135, with the Quatuor Ebene. I looked up various places and none of them would tell me what Ebene was about, but it's Quartet Ebene. They are very, very, very swish. They perform, particularly, always one of the big signs to look for with the chamber music people is do they perform at Verbier, and the Verbier Festival, the top line of the chamber music festivals. Yes, they perform there, so they're top of the line. Our singers, top singers, we have Nicole Carr, who will be reprising her. She sang the Rusalka. I didn't see it because I was away, but she has done in Sydney Rusalka.
Yes, I think she got great reviews for that.
Great reviews. Excellent.
Great reviews for that performance here.
It would suit her perfectly. It's a role that would be just written for Nicole. I remember when she sang the Evgeny Onegin, the Tatiana in Evgeny Onegin, again, another role that was like written to be sung by Nicole Carr. She had a great success around the world singing that. And I thought, I'm glad you say that, Mark, because having not heard it, I sort of say I can't be sure, but I was thinking she'd be perfect for Rusalka, the water nymph. And in those two works, in the Rusalka, we've got Ekaterina Gubanova, one of my favorite heavy mezzo. She's a very, very good, it's a high mezzo, but it's a strong voice. She sings Wagner almost invariably. Wagner and Richard Strauss are the big numbers for her. And she's singing The Foreign Princess, so that she's the rival love interest, so that should be very interesting. Then for Norma, which we have Norma at the Staatsoper in Berlin, we have Sonia Yoncheva. By chance, many years ago, it has got to be maybe 8, 9 years ago, 9 perhaps, I think, I saw her sing her first Norma at Covent Garden. She was very young then. She's a very, very wonderful singer. And I remember thinking, this is not a great idea as a young singer to be singing Norma. It seemed a bit, but she managed it perfectly. She sang it as she could sing it with her voice as it was. It was very impressive. I thought, wow, that she did very, very well. She's still singing it around the world. I've noticed 3 or 4 places. I mean, she's sung it at the Met. She's about to sing it, I think, at La Scala. And she's our Norma. And we have now an announced detail for Adalgisa, because in the book, in the online program, there is no singer. It just says to be announced. And Angela Broer, who's a young American mezzo, who is famous for singing Octavian, means she's a high mezzo, which means she should be fine for Adalgisa. It's a tricky role. It's really, really written for a light soprano voice. So a high mezzo, a young high mezzo should be fine. So that's Katerina. So, and with Yoncheva, we have a really interesting tenor for Pollione. Pollione is a difficult role. It's really a heroic tenor role before there was anything really that was really a heroic a label, right? It's the Norma dates from 1831, so it's just the beginning of where you might talk about a dramatic soprano or a heroic tenor. And Pollione is a tricky role to sing, but there's a chap called Freddie de Tommaso, and he's apparently British-Italian. I listened to him, I fired him up for a couple of arias. And the voice is it's very strong, but I would say perhaps not beautiful. Doesn't sound particularly beautiful. It's not a gorgeous tenor voice, right? As we've had many gorgeous tenor voices. This is a strong voice, and I thought, well, it'd be ideal for Polione, I reckon. Be really, really good. I mean, he sings all the repertoire, but the voice just struck me as it's got a bit of steel in it, you know, a bit of strength in it. And I think that would be good. And the other detail that we need, the important thing to talk about is the singer for the role of Aminta. This was also to be announced, so it was not in.
Yes.
You've not been able to read this detail, but the role of Aminta has got to be. It's up there. It's up there with the Queen of the Night. But if it's the Queen of the Night singing all night. Right? Queen of the Night has to negotiate 2 arias, right? She has got nothing much else except a bit of recitative here and there and a small ensemble. She's got 2 big showpiece arias, right, with the high F at the end of the second one. Anyhow, so the role of Aminta is very much like Queen of the Night, non-stop. The amount of high singing and high coloratura singing is staggering, absolutely staggering. And luckily, I've looked up this young woman, Serena Sáenz. She's now, I think we're in the process of putting these names on.
Yes, we'll update the website.
Updating the web page. But Serena Sáenz has won all sorts of awards as a young singer. Really. And reviews and words about her are like astonishing. Really sounds like huge. And she will be singing Aminta for us in the Silent Woman. Of course, the joke about the Silent Woman, it's like Don Pasquale, as I said. You know, she's brought in as a coy silent woman who can barely say good evening. You know, and then. The deal is that she will then let fly. And she lets fly with more or less non-stop coloratura. It's astonishing. I've got an old recording of it from way back. I've had it forever. Way back early on when I was first listening to Staatsoperas, I bought it. And just, wow, I'd forgotten just how dazzling. And so with a young singer, as long as she is smart and you know, she wouldn't be saying yes to the role. Mind you, she's being offered the role with Christian Thielemann conducting at the Berlin Staatsoper. So she would say yes. And the other thing to remember about that opera house is that it's quite an old opera house. It's been beautifully refurbished, as I said, and it's got all new stage machinery. But it's a very moderate-sized opera house. When you see it from outside, you walk in and you think, oh, that's not so. It's not huge. It's a very, you know, it's built in the mid-19th century, basically, in fact, early, it's more like the 1820s originally built. It was, of course, almost completely destroyed in the Second World War, and was rebuilt then after the war. Somewhere I wrote the date for when it was. I can't remember. It really doesn't matter. But it's something like 1965. It was rebuilt, and it's a very fun opera. It's got a very good acoustic. That will help Joncheva with the Norma and Sáenz with the Aminta, because those are the 2 operas we see there. Okay. Talked about venues, talked about...
Certainly sounds like something to look forward to.
Yes, absolutely. And then the final thing is that is just to remind you what it's not got a huge touring program because we're staying in the cities, right? We're not traveling from A to B. So sometimes going from A to B, like from Barcelona to Madrid, we stop somewhere in a major sort of city along the way to see something, but not like that. This is just the 2 cities, 2 nice hotels.
Yes.
And there's an excursion out of Paris, just out of Paris, to the outskirts to Malmaison, which is where Josephine Bonaparte lived. That was her villa, her chateau. And that's where she, I don't know quite what the right word was, once she was shuffled off and Napoleon married the Austrian princess Marie Louise. That's where Josephine retired to her chateau. So it's, I don't know, it's touching, poignant sort of place. I find it's very moving. And yet, of course, Napoleon was there an enormous amount in the earlier stages of it. And he, of course, built, maybe it was an existing building. I forget now which it was. But anyhow, Malmaison, an excursion. We go to the Cluny Museum, which has a fabulous collection of medieval art, particularly French, and the wonderful Lady of the Unicorn tapestries. The other set, the green set, are in the cloisters in New York, but this is the red set, right? So the red Lady and the Unicorn tapestries. The Musée d'Orsay, of course, can't miss it to see the Impressionists. That have all been rehung. They used to be crowded together in the most. Musée d'Orsay is, having been a railway station, it's a slightly problematic art gallery, I have to say. I don't know that it ever has really worked, but it has better modes. Anyhow, they fixed the Impressionist rooms because they used to be, all the paintings were too close together. And they've moved some of them into one of them. I can never remember it's the Jeu de Paume or the two buildings that are at the end of the on the Place de la Concorde, the Jeu de Paume, I think. Okay, Musée d'Orsay. The Musée Carnavalet. It's actually a free museum, but we take you there, right? We take you there and we get the free tickets. It's a free museum, but people don't go there. And so it's essential to go there. It's one of the best museums ever. And they doubled the size of the museum. They joined two old buildings together and made it much more. It used to be overcrowded, I have to say, with stuff. And it's got an amazing collection of it. It's a museum of Paris. Wonderful, wonderful experience. I go there every time we go to Paris. We have an excursion there, and every time I try to see everything. You can't. It's kind of like impossible. There's too much. It's enormous. And you get a ticket where you can go back. You can have lunch and go back. So it's I'm just saying that because it looks like, oh, we're taking you to see free museums. No, we take you down to the Marais and show you around the Marais a bit and point out, do not miss this museum. Then again, free to go to Notre Dame.
Yes.
Oh my God. I mean, you remember the fire, you saw the conflagration. I thought it was gone.
Amazing.
There is no way. There was no way. Once the roof was on flame, the spire and flames. Outside now, you think there's the spire again. There's the spire sitting there. There's the front, of course, was not damaged. The big, heavy front. The fire didn't get to that, so that's still there. But the nave had to be really reconstructed, and the roof and everything, and it looks marvelous. It looks better than it used to look.
Extraordinary.
It's really, really wonderful. Again, it's a free thing to do, but we take you there. We do that usually on the way back from the Musée d'Orsay, which is not the Musée d'Orsay, the Musée de Cluny. The Cluny Museum is not far away, and we walk over to Notre Dame to have a look inside. Then there's the extraordinary 5 museums that are on the Museum Island in Berlin. One of them, the Pergamon Museum,
still closed.
Still closed. This must be, I don't know what.
Several years now.
7 years now, something like that. They say they're going to. There's talk. I'll believe it when I see it. That they're going to open the Pergamon's section of it, the Pergamon altar, at the beginning I think it was at the beginning of next year. That would be great if they do, but I'm not promising it because you know what these things are like. Oh,
Mm,
do it. And of course, they might be the beginning of the next year, perhaps. It's sort of on track to open at some stage, but not completely open, just the fabulous bit. But I think they're sick of people complaining that they can't
yeah.
see the thing they came to Berlin to see, sort of thing. Anyhow, there's just a great. There's 5 museums. The Neue Museum, which is where the Nefertiti bust,
Mhm.
the Egyptian collection.
Yeah.
There's then we go to the two. There's a possibility. There's the Alter Kunstgalerie there, and then there's the Gemälde Gallery. That's in a completely different place over near when we go to the Philharmonie. That's where the other art gallery is, and we see that. And nearby that, just tucked around the side of the Philharmonie, is the Museum of Musical Instruments.
Mhm.
So that's, and then we have a very nice, relaxed canal river cruise and end up then going up to Norman Foster's dome
Yeah.
on the Reichstag. I have difficulty not putting those together. Reichstag, the big dome. Under those,
Mm.
Käfer's got a restaurant there. They have, the famous one is in Munich, but this one in Berlin is very good. And we have our farewell lunch there. And then in the evening, we go to see Die Schweigsame Frau at the Staatsoper, conducted by Christian Tiedemann, and with this wonderful unknown at the moment to us, coloratura soprano Serena
Mhm.
Science singing Aminta.
Well, it sounds incredible. Sounds like you've put together a great suite of performances, a great sort of diverse range of a good program, some great touring to fantastic cities.
Great.
We're sort of coming to the end, but if anyone did have a question that they wanted to type into the chat, they can. Also, I'll just point out too, of course, on a tour with Robert, you don't just go to the opera or the performances, but Robert also gives in-depth talks or gives talks before so that your experience is heightened. As we've been talking today, with all these interesting little facts and pieces about what's coming up. But it's been a lovely afternoon chatting to you, Robert, as it always is. Very exciting, and this looks to be a great tour. I know you'll enjoy it, and wonderful sort of some renewal as well with Notre Dame, as you say, and places like that on the itinerary, and some new performers that you haven't seen before, and
Absolutely, yes.
some great new performances that, like you say, that you hadn't seen before. So I think that's very exciting, and that's great.
Wonderful.
So
Right.
we
Thanks.
look forward to sending you on your way and
Yeah.
welcoming anyone on board. And
Everyone.
once again, thanks, Robert, and we'll say cheerio. Good
Great.
afternoon, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.